My ex accused me of abandoning our son, refused paternity proof. Then court unveiled her shocking multi-man scheme. You think you know someone, right? You spend years with them, share dreams, make plans. You build a life, or at least you think you are. And then, one day, they drop a bomb that doesn't just shake your world. It rearranges your entire universe, makes you question every memory, every shared glance. They say hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. They forgot to mention the one who was never actually scorned but decides to burn your world down anyway for sport. Or maybe, as I later found out, it was for something much darker, much more twisted. My story with Sarah, well, it started like many others. Passion, excitement, that feeling of finding your person. We got engaged. I was an architect, just started to make a name for myself, pouring all my energy into establishing my own small firm. The pressure was immense, but so was the thrill. My latest project, a big one, a potential game changer for my career, required me to be out of state on a pretty remote site for 7 solid weeks. No easy trips back, no weekend visits. Just me, the plans, and a looming deadline. Our relationship, if I'm being honest, had been fraying at the edges for a while before that trip. Sarah, an aspiring actress whose aspirations always seemed to outweigh her auditions, had become a lot. The vibrant woman I fell for had been slowly replaced by someone who thrived on drama, who needed constant attention, whose moods could turn on a dime. It was suffocating. That 7-week work trip, as stressful as it was professionally, also felt like a necessary breather, a chance for me to clear my head. I'd already decided, with a heavy heart, that I needed to end things. I figured I'd do it when I got back. Face to face, respectful. That was the plan, anyway. The day I returned, I was running on fumes, a mix of exhaustion from the project and a quiet dread about the conversation to come. I walked into our apartment, and Sarah was different, almost manically cheerful, an unsettling brightness in her eyes. "Mark, you're back. We need to talk. I have the most wonderful news," she trilled, practically bouncing. My stomach tightened. This wasn't the prelude to the breakup talk I was expecting. She sat me down on the couch, her hands fluttering. "Well, go on," I said, trying to sound casual. She took a deep breath, her eyes wide and shining. "Mark, I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. Pregnant? I just stared at her, my mind struggling to process. A baby. Our baby? It felt unreal. A wave of dizziness washed over me. After a moment that felt like an eternity, my practical brain kicked in. "Wow, Sarah, that's big news." I paused, trying to gather my thoughts. How far along are you?" She beamed, a triumphant, almost possessive smile spreading across her face. "Oh, about 7, maybe 8 weeks." And just like that, the floor dropped out from under me. 7 or 8 weeks. My internal alarm bells weren't just ringing. They were screaming, a full-blown 5-alarm fire drill in my head. I looked at her, really looked at her, and a cold dread started to creep up my spine. "Sarah," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "I've been out of state, completely isolated on that remote construction site for 7 full weeks. 7. No trips back, remember? You know how intense it was. The math isn't mateing here." Her radiant expression flickered, then vanished, replaced by a look of stunned outrage. It was like flipping a switch. 1 second, joyous mother-to-be. The next, a woman deeply, mortally wounded. Are you calling me a liar, Mark?" Tears welled in her eyes instantly. "Masterfully done. After everything we've been through, this is your child. Our child. How could you even suggest? How could you be so cruel?" She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs that felt just a little too theatrical. She refused to discuss the dates, the impossibilities, just kept repeating, "It's yours, Mark, it's yours." I was shaken, I won't lie. Part of me, a stupid, naive part, wanted to believe her, to sweep the glaring discrepancy under the rug. But the architect in me, the part that deals in facts and figures and precise measurements, couldn't ignore it. This foundation was faulty. "Okay, Sarah," I said, my voice firmer now, the initial shock hardening into a necessary resolve. If this is my child, then I will absolutely be a father. I will step up. But two things are non-negotiable. She looked up, tears streaming, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. One, I continued, an immediate, clinically verified paternity test. No home kits, no ambiguity. A proper lab. Her breath hitched. Two, I pressed on, if that test is positive, then all arrangements regarding custody, support, everything will be handled through our respective lawyers. I will not be emotionally blackmailed or manipulated into anything. The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The tears stopped as if a faucet had been turned off. Her face, moments ago a mask of sorrow, hardened into cold fury. A paternity test? She spat, her voice dripping with venom. You're disgusting. You're trying to shame me. You're trying to wriggle out of your responsibility. I'm trying to establish the truth, Sarah. I countered, though my heart was pounding. The truth is that I am pregnant with your baby, she shrieked. I will not submit to such a humiliating, insulting procedure. Then we're done, Sarah, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Completely. There's no us without that truth. She actually laughed, a short, sharp, chilling sound. Oh, Mark, you're just stressed from your trip. You don't mean that. I don't accept your breakup. She walked over to me, tried to touch my arm. We're a family now. You'll see. I left the apartment shortly after, my head spinning. It felt like I'd stepped into an alternate reality. But the nightmare was just beginning. Within 48 hours, the coordinated attack began. Vague, pity-inducing posts started appearing on Sarah's social media. Feeling so alone and scared when you expect support and get betrayal. Then came the calls from mutual friends, hesitant, confused. Dude, is everything okay? Sarah saying some pretty heavy stuff. My sister, Emily, a corporate lawyer with a bullshit detector sharper than a scalpel, called me. Mark, what the hell is Sarah posting online? She's crafting this narrative that you ran off on your pregnant fiancé. You need to tell me exactly what happened. I laid it all out for her. Emily was silent for a moment, then said, Okay, this is bad. This woman is not just upset. She's strategic. From this moment on, you document everything. Dates, times, witnesses, save every text, every email. And then came the voicemails from Mrs. Gable, Sarah's mother. A series of them, each more unhinged than the last, full of accusations, calling me a monster, a coward, threatening to ruin me, and make sure everyone knew what kind of man I really was. I sat there, listening to the vitriol, the cold dread solidifying in my gut. This wasn't a breakup. This was a declaration of war. And Sarah, with her mother as her apparent field marshal, had just launched the first devastating salvo. I opened a new document on my laptop, typed in the date, and started my log. Emily was right. This was going to be a battle. Emily's advice became my mantra: document everything. Dates, times, witnesses, save every message. Record calls if it's legal in her state. This woman is a professional victim, Mark, and you need an arsenal of facts to fight her fiction. Our state was a one-party consent state for recording conversations, a small mercy. I bought a high-quality digital voice recorder, compact enough to be discreet, and it became my constant companion. My laptop soon housed a meticulously organized collection of folders. Screenshots of Sarah's social media posts, saved text messages, email exchanges, audio files of her increasingly erratic voicemails, and detailed notes of every unsolicited visit or public encounter. Sarah's campaign of harassment wasn't just emotional. It was a multi-front assault designed to break me. The psychological warfare was relentless. Texts would arrive at all hours. Blurry ultrasound pictures that, for all I knew, could have been copied from the internet. Messages like, Leo misses his daddy already, or I can feel him kicking, wishing you were here to feel it too. Then there were the voicemails, sometimes tearful and pleading, other times laced with a chilling bitterness. Unsolicited baby gifts started appearing on my doorstep. Tiny booties, a stuffed animal, a silver rattle. Items clearly chosen to inflict maximum guilt, always with a cloyingly sweet note signed from your loving son, Leo, and his mommy. But she didn't stop there. Sarah escalated to trying to sabotage my professional life, the one area where I felt I still had some control. She sent anonymous emails to a couple of my key clients, the ones whose projects were crucial for my firm's fledgling reputation. The emails were cleverly worded, full of vague insinuations about my unstable personal life and impending scandalous fatherhood that might impact my reliability. Thankfully, my clients were more discerning than she gave them credit for, but it still meant awkward conversations and a desperate scramble on my part to reassure them. Emily helped me draft careful, professional responses, and I even had a quiet consultation with a reputation management specialist she knew. Sarah also tried to leave fake, one-star online reviews for my firm, complaining about unprofessional behavior and missed deadlines on non-existent projects. It was a constant game of whack-a-mole, trying to stamp out these fires before they spread. Her public ambushes were perhaps the worst. She'd accidentally run into me at my regular coffee shop, launching into a tearful monologue about her struggles. She appeared at an industry networking event I was attending, making a beeline for me, loudly asking when I was going to step up for our child. Each encounter was a perfectly staged performance, designed to paint me as the villain in front of an audience. Life felt like walking through a minefield. I started trying to rebuild a personal life, cautiously. I met Jessica, a graphic designer, through a mutual friend. She was smart, funny, and refreshingly drama-free. We started dating, keeping things low-key. Of course, Sarah found out. She engineered a chance encounter at a quiet restaurant where Jessica and I were having dinner. Sarah, feigning a stumble, accidentally spilled a glass of red wine all over Jessica, then burst into tears, launching into a loud, heart-wrenching saga about how I'd abandoned her and our sick baby for this new woman. Jessica was stunned, humiliated. The entire restaurant was staring. Later that week, the real test came. Jessica called me, her voice tight. "Mark, can you come over? There's something we need to talk about." When I got to her apartment, she was holding a small, expensive-looking plush giraffe. "I found this in your car this morning," she said, her eyes searching mine. "Under the passenger seat." My blood ran cold. I hadn't put it there. "Sarah." Instead of exploding or accusing, Jessica just looked at me, waiting. That small act of trust, of giving me a chance to explain, meant the world. I took a deep breath and told her everything. I didn't just tell her, I showed her. I went back to my apartment, brought over my laptop, and walked her through the folders, the messages, the recordings, the timeline of Sarah's calculated harassment. Jessica listened, her expression shifting from confusion to horror, then to a quiet, steely anger on my behalf. When I was finished, she reached out and took my hand. "This woman is a monster, Mark," she said, her voice firm. "And you've been going through this alone?" "Not anymore. We fight this together." In that moment, I knew Jessica was someone truly special. Sarah's attempt to drive a wedge between us had only solidified our bond. The legal front was equally exhausting. I obtained a temporary restraining order. Sarah, predictably, violated it with calculated precision. She wouldn't contact me directly, but Mrs. Gable would suddenly appear in my building's lobby with a care package from Sarah for the baby, or a mutual acquaintance would casually mention Sarah's latest heartbreak. When the order expired, Sarah herself was back at it within days. This became a draining, expensive 2-year cycle. One evening, her harassment escalated to a frightening new level. She showed up at my apartment well after midnight, screaming my name, banging on the door, demanding to be let in to talk about Leo. Her cries were so loud and disturbing that one of my neighbors called the police. Detective Miller, a seasoned officer with tired eyes, was one of the cops who responded. His initial demeanor was one of weary cynicism. "Another lover's quarrel. Huh? Can't you people just sort this out without waking up the whole neighborhood?" But I was prepared. I calmly presented my active restraining order, my detailed log of her previous violations, and then played a brief snippet from my digital recorder of Sarah's current tirade outside my door. Detective Miller's expression changed. He listened, read, and then looked at Sarah, who was now putting on a tearful, confused victim act for him. "Okay, Mr. Johnson," he said to me, his tone now all business. "Looks like you've got your ducks in a row." He turned to Sarah. "Ma'am, You're in violation of a court order. You need to come with us. It was the first time Sarah faced any real, albeit minor, legal consequence. She was booked and released, but it was a small victory. Detective Miller gave me his card. If she pulls anything else, you call me directly. He was no longer just a random cop. He was a contact, someone in the system who'd seen a glimpse of the truth. But I knew this was far from over. Sarah was like a relentless siege engine, and I was just trying to survive the constant barrage. Years crawled by in this exhausting rhythm of harassment, legal battles, and brief, fragile periods of peace. Leo, the child Sarah insisted was mine, would have been around 4 years old. I'd only ever seen him in the photos she'd periodically send, photos I'd delete without opening, though the subject lines of the emails, like your son's first t-ball game, were like tiny persistent paper cuts. My relationship with Jessica had deepened. She was my rock, my sanctuary from the storms Sarah perpetually created. My architectural firm was slowly but steadily growing, despite Sarah's attempts at sabotage. Life went on, but always with her shadow looming. Then, a chink of light appeared in the most unexpected way. I was at an architectural alumni networking event, a dreary obligation I usually tried to avoid. I ran into Alex, an old friend from college. We'd lost touch, but he was easy to talk to. He was a journalist now, an investigative reporter for a city paper. As we were catching up, he asked about my life, and I, weary from years of carrying this burden, vaguely mentioned my incredibly complicated ex-fiancé situation and the endless drama. Alex, with his reporter's instincts, picked up on the undertones. He leaned in. Complicated how? Anything unusual? I hesitated, then gave him a highly condensed version. The suspicious pregnancy claim, the refusal of a paternity test, the relentless harassment. He listened intently, his brow furrowed. The MO, the method of operation, it sounds eerily familiar, Mark. I covered a story a while back, different circumstances, but there was this element of protracted, manipulative deception by a woman. Wait a minute. He frowned. What's Sarah's last name again? Gable, I said. Sarah Gable. Her mother, Mrs. Gable, was apparently some local beauty pageant queen back in the day, a real piece of work herself. Alex's eyes widened slightly. He pulled out his phone, tapping away. Hold on. Sarah Gable, mother of pageant queen. I think my old editor might know a guy, a contact, who briefly dated a Sarah Gable years ago. She apparently claimed a miracle pregnancy right after they broke up, timeline all screwy. He told her to get lost. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be, after all this time, a lead? Alex, can you connect me with him? If it's the same person, if she's done this before. Let me see what I can do, Alex said, his journalistic curiosity now fully engaged. No promises, but I'll dig around. A week later, Alex called. Mark, I think I found him. His name is Chris. He's a software developer. And yeah, he remembers Sarah Gable. Vividly, and not fondly. He's willing to talk to you. I met Chris for coffee the next day. He was a cynical, sharp guy, and as he recounted his story, I felt a wave of cold recognition wash over me. It was Sarah's playbook, almost identical to what she'd pulled on me. The whirlwind romance, the sudden breakup, initiated by him, in his case, followed a few weeks later by the tearful pregnancy announcement. Yeah, that's psycho, Chris said, shaking his head. Claimed she was pregnant like a month after we were done. I knew something was fishy. Demanded a DNA test on the spot. She threw a fit, called me every name in the book, then basically ghosted me when I wouldn't budge. I figured I dodged a nuke. He looked at me. Sounds like you weren't so lucky. Not even close, I said grimly. Chris, with his tech skills and a newfound desire to see Sarah get some kind of comeuppance, offered to help. If she did it to us, Mark, she's probably done it to others. We just need to find them. We started digging. It was slow, painstaking work. We scoured old social media platforms, university alumni networks, even old forum posts where people discussed local theater groups Sarah had briefly been involved with, looking for any men publicly linked to her around plausible conception windows for a child Leo's age, and even before. We hit a lot of dead ends. People who barely remembered her, or who only knew her superficially. Then, Through a connection Chris made via an old online photography club Sarah had briefly joined, we found Tom. Tom was a high school English teacher, a gentle, almost painfully earnest man. He was hesitant to talk at first, deeply embarrassed. But eventually, he admitted his story. He dated Sarah for a few months. After they drifted apart, she'd contacted him, tearfully claiming to be pregnant and destitute, hinting he might be the father. She just seemed so desperate, so alone, Tom said, his voice laced with shame. I felt sorry for her. I gave her money. Not a lot, just a few hundred here and there for about a year. For the baby. Every time I'd gently suggest a paternity test, just for clarity, she'd have a complete meltdown, accuse me of not trusting her, of being cruel. Eventually, I just stopped asking and stopped paying. She called me a monster. Tom represented the kind of man Sarah preyed on, the empathetic, slightly guilt-prone type. Our discoveries were starting to form a disturbing pattern. It wasn't just me. Sarah had a history. As if on cue, Mrs. Gable, Sarah's mother, somehow got wind that I was talking to other men from Sarah's past. She launched her own counteroffensive. Tom received a call from a blocked number. A woman's voice, dripping with venom, warned him to stop spreading lies about poor, innocent Sarah and accused him of conspiring with that vindictive Mark Johnson. This, ironically, only strengthened Tom's resolve to cooperate with us. It proved Sarah and her mother were actively trying to suppress the truth. The next lead was Ryan, a musician Chris tracked down through an old bandmate of Sarah's. Ryan was younger, angrier. Sarah Gable? That witch. Yeah, I dated her. She claimed she was pregnant right after I told her I was going on tour. Demanded money. Threatened to tell my conservative parents I'd knocked her up and abandoned her. I was young, terrified, and broke. She nearly bankrupted me with her demands for 6 months before I finally blocked her everywhere and changed my number. The final piece of the puzzle, and the most difficult to secure, was Paul. Paul was a successful, married businessman in his early 40s with 2 young children. Chris found a tangential connection to him through a charity event Sarah had volunteered at years ago. When Mark and Chris carefully approached him, Paul reacted with sheer terror. Sarah Gable, he whispered, his face pale. If my business partners ever found out I even knew her, it would destroy everything I've worked for. She contacted me again just a few months ago out of the blue. Sent a picture of a little boy. Said his name was Leo. Said he looked just like me. Hinted that I should contribute to his future education. I've been having nightmares. He initially threatened to call the police on us if we contacted him again. It was Emily who suggested the solution. He's terrified of public exposure. Direct confrontation won't work. Send an anonymous, untraceable package to his lawyer. No return address. Just the basic facts of your experiences with Sarah, Chris's, Tom's, Ryan's. Hard evidence of her pattern. Let his lawyer advise him. We did just that. 2 agonizing weeks passed. Then Ms. Albright, the formidable fraud and family lawyer Emily had insisted I retain, received a call. It was from Paul's attorney. Paul was in. He was still terrified, but the evidence we provided, coupled with Sarah's recent attempt to extort him for Leo's college fund, had convinced him he couldn't stay silent. The scope of it was staggering. 5 men, including me, all subjected to the same insidious script, the same emotional blackmail, the same refusals of paternity tests. Sarah wasn't just a jilted ex obsessed with me. She was a serial manipulator, a con artist using a child whose real paternity was a mystery, as her primary tool. And her mother was her accomplice. The fight was about to get a whole lot bigger. With Paul on board, our fellowship of the deceived was complete. 5 men from different walks of life, united by one woman's relentless campaign of lies. Ms. Albright, our legal counsel, was a force of nature. She was a sharp, no-nonsense veteran of countless courtroom battles, and when she heard all our stories, a grimly satisfied look settled on her face. "Gentlemen," she'd said, "this isn't just a case of a disgruntled ex. This is a pattern of calculated fraud, harassment, and emotional abuse. And we're going to dismantle it piece by piece." Her strategy was bold. Instead of individual actions, she filed a comprehensive civil suit against Sarah Gable. The claims were numerous: fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, and, crucially, a petition for a court-ordered paternity test for the child known as Leo, naming Sarah as the defendant and all five of us, myself, Chris, Tom, Ryan, and Paul, as potential fathers requiring definitive exclusion. The goal was to expose the entire scheme in one fell swoop. The first hurdle was Mr. Henderson, Sarah's estranged but very wealthy industrialist father. Ms. Albright believed he might be unknowingly funding Sarah's lifestyle and, by extension, her deceptions, likely fed a curated sob story by Sarah and Mrs. Gable. Her initial contact with him was met with explosive anger. "My daughter Sarah is a victim here," he'd roared over the phone at Ms. Albright. "That Mark Johnson is a vindictive liar, and he's somehow roped these other poor saps into his vendetta. I will not stand for this harassment of my child." Ms. Albright, unfazed, calmly replied, "Mr. Henderson, I understand your loyalty. However, I have irrefutable evidence that your daughter has presented significantly different narratives, and indeed different alleged fathers, to multiple men regarding the paternity of her son, Leo, often coinciding with requests for financial assistance. I would be happy to share this documentation with your legal counsel." There was a stunned silence. He eventually agreed to a discreet meeting, his lawyers present. Ms. Albright laid out the timeline, the corroborated stories, the financial trails where Sarah had cited different men as the source of her hardship at different times. The color drained from Mr. Henderson's face as he absorbed the sheer scale of the manipulation. The man was a titan of industry, used to dealing with sharks, but he'd been thoroughly played by his own daughter and ex-wife. His considerable financial support for Sarah and Mrs. Gable, we later learned, was quietly and immediately severed. Sarah, meanwhile, was not going down without a fight. Her lawyer, a flashy but ultimately outmatched attorney, attempted a pre-trial gambit. He presented Ms. Albright with a DNA report from a rather obscure online laboratory, complete with official-looking seals and scientific jargon, purportedly proving with 99.9% certainty that I, Mark Johnson, was Leo's biological father. They demanded the lawsuit be dropped immediately, accompanied by a public apology from me. Ms. Albright barely blinked. "Interesting," she said. With Chris's tech expertise, they quickly investigated the lab. It turned out to be little more than a shell company with a P.O. box address and a website full of stock photos. Ms. Albright then brought in a respected forensic genetics expert. In a pre-trial hearing, our expert systematically demolished the report, highlighting its lack of accreditation, questionable chain of custody for the samples, and several glaring inconsistencies with standard scientific protocols. The judge, a stern, experienced woman named Judge Harrison, issued a very pointed warning to Sarah and her counsel about the severe penalties for submitting fraudulent evidence to the court. Sarah's face was a mask of indignation, but a flicker of panic was visible in her eyes. The day of the main hearing arrived. The courtroom was small, the atmosphere thick with tension. Sarah and Mrs. Gable were there, dressed in somber, conservative outfits, the very picture of persecuted mother-daughter solidarity. Sarah even dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief as we, the five plaintiffs, took our seats with Ms. Albright. One by one, Chris, Tom, Ryan, and Paul recounted their experiences. Chris, with his cynical wit, detailed Sarah's immediate flip when he demanded a test. Tom, his voice quiet with shame, spoke of the money he'd given her, swayed by her tales of woe. Ryan, his anger still palpable, described the financial stress and the threats she'd made. Paul, visibly nervous but resolute, recounted Sarah's recent attempt to extort him for Leo's college fund. Each story, while unique in its details, echoed the same core narrative: Sarah's claims of pregnancy, her insistence on their paternity, her adamant refusal of any verification, and the emotional or financial manipulation that followed. When Sarah took the stand, her performance was, I had to admit, Oscar-worthy. She wept, she pleaded, she portrayed herself as a bewildered single mother hounded by a cabal of cruel, vindictive ex-lovers. I'm just a mother, she choked out, looking beseechingly at Judge Harrison. Try and protect my son, Leo, from all this ugliness. All I ever wanted was for him to know his father. But Ms. Albright's cross-examination was relentless, a masterclass in controlled demolition. She picked apart Sarah's inconsistencies, her conflicting timelines, her convenient memory lapses. Then, under a barrage of questions about her financial situation and her various claims to different men, Sarah snapped. It's always the same with men like you, she suddenly spat, her voice raw with an unexpected venom, glaring at Ms. Albright, but clearly meaning all of us. You take what you want, and then you leave women to pick up the pieces. Just like my first fiancé, David. He ruined my life, left me with nothing. The courtroom was silent. In that outburst, a deeper, perhaps uglier motive than just financial gain had been briefly, starkly illuminated, a festering bitterness, a possible vendetta. Judge Harrison watched Sarah intently, her expression unreadable. After Ms. Albright concluded, the judge looked directly at Sarah. Ms. Gable, this court has heard testimony from 5 different men, all detailing remarkably similar and disturbing patterns of behavior on your part, including a consistent refusal to submit to paternity testing. Furthermore, the issue of a potentially fraudulent DNA document submitted by your counsel is deeply concerning. She paused, her gaze sweeping over all of us. Given the extraordinary circumstances and the conflicting claims, this court orders an immediate, court-supervised paternity test for the child, Leo. All 5 plaintiffs, and you, Ms. Gable, on behalf of your son, will submit to DNA sample collection by a court-appointed, accredited laboratory. Today, no delays, no excuses. Sarah let out a strangled shriek of protest. You can't do this. It's a violation. It's barbaric. Judge Harrison's gavel came down with a sharp crack. The court has ruled, Ms. Gable. Any further outbursts will be treated as contempt. Sarah slumped in her chair, her face pale, her eyes darting around like a trapped animal. The carefully constructed facade was crumbling. The truth, it seemed, was finally going to have its day. The wait for the paternity test results was excruciating, a strange limbo between hope and a lingering, irrational fear. Weeks later, Ms. Albright called. I remember my hand shaking as I answered the phone. Jessica was beside me, her hand gripping mine tightly. Mark, Ms. Albright's voice was calm, professional, but I could hear a hint of satisfaction. The results are in. They are conclusive and unequivocal. 0 probability of paternity for you. 0 probability for Chris, for Tom, for Ryan, and for Paul. None of you are Leo's father. A wave of relief, so profound it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. It was over. The lie that had shadowed my life for so many years was finally, officially, demonstrably false. Jessica pulled me into a hug, tears in her own eyes. The other men, when Ms. Albright informed them, shared a similar reaction. An explosive mix of vindication, anger at the lost years and emotional turmoil, and an overwhelming sense of liberation. We had a brief conference call, not of celebration, but of grim acknowledgement. We had walked through fire together and come out the other side. Sarah, predictably, did not take the news well. When officially served with the court's findings, which also included a substantial order for her to cover all our legal costs and significant damages for the fraud and emotional distress, she completely unraveled. The very next day, she appeared outside my office building. I'd moved my firm to a new, more secure location after one of her previous workplace ambushes, but somehow she'd found me. She created a horrifying scene in the busy downtown street, screaming incoherently, accusing me of hiring criminals to falsify DNA tests, of conspiring to steal her son, of ruining her life and turning Leo against her. Her tirade was wild, unhinged. Jessica, who happened to be meeting me for lunch, calmly took out her phone and dialed Detective Miller directly. He'd given us his personal number after her last major public disturbance. Within minutes, several police cars arrived. Detective Miller himself stepped out of one. Sarah was still mid-rant, spittle flying, her face contorted with rage. This time, there were no warnings. Given her blatant violation of the reinforced restraining order Judge Harrison had issued pending the outcome of the civil suit, and her clearly disruptive and threatening behavior, she was arrested on the spot. As they cuffed her, she shot me a look of pure, undiluted hatred. "This isn't over, Mark. You'll pay for this," she shrieked, before being guided into a police car. The fallout for what I now thought of as House Gable was swift and severe. Mr. Henderson, Sarah's father, armed with the court's findings and his own lawyers, took decisive action. He publicly disavowed both Sarah and Mrs. Gable, cutting them off completely. He then initiated legal proceedings to gain full legal custody of Leo, citing Sarah's proven manipulative behavior, her emotional instability, and the clear evidence that she was an unfit mother who had used her son as a pawn in elaborate fraud schemes. Evidence even surfaced during these proceedings, brought forth by Mr. Henderson's forensic accountants, that Mrs. Gable had been more than just a passive enabler. She had actively participated in some of Sarah's financial deceptions, even benefiting directly from funds solicited under false pretenses. She found herself facing her own legal troubles and becoming a social pariah in their community. Sarah herself was facing a battery of charges, multiple counts of fraud, perjury for the submission of the fake DNA test to the court, and repeated violations of court orders. Her acting aspirations, if she ever truly had any beyond her daily performances, were definitively over. A few weeks later, Ms. Albright forwarded me a letter. It was from Leo, passed on through a child therapist Mr. Henderson had engaged. Leo was about 6 or 7 by now. His letter, written in a child's unsteady hand and likely guided by the therapist, was heartbreaking. "Dear Mr. Mark," it began, "my grandpa says you are not my daddy. Mommy said you were my daddy, but then sometimes she said Mr. Tom was my daddy or Mr. Ryan. It's very confusing. Who is my real daddy? If you're not my daddy, will you still be my friend? Mommy is crying a lot. I miss my toys." Reading it, I felt a profound ache in my chest. This poor kid, caught in the wreckage of his mother's lies, his entire young life built on a foundation of deceit. I felt an overwhelming sense of sorrow for his stolen innocence. My own life began to find a new, calmer rhythm. Jessica and I focused on healing and rebuilding. My architectural firm, finally free from the shadow of Sarah's sabotage, began to truly thrive. I even went to a few therapy sessions at Jessica's gentle urging to process the years of trauma and gaslighting. The sense of liberation was immense, but it was tinged with a sadness for Leo, the innocent victim in all of this. Months later, as Sarah's legal battles continued to mire her deeper in trouble, Mr. Henderson reached out to me through Ms. Albright. He was making progress in creating a stable, loving environment for Leo. He had also, with a quiet determination, begun the arduous process of trying to identify Leo's actual biological father, using DNA databases and private investigators. He had a question for me. "Mark," Mr. Henderson said when we spoke, his voice tired but kind, he's a good boy. He's been through more than any child should. His therapist thinks it might help him, give him some sense of closure, if he could meet, just once, briefly, and in a controlled setting, with the men his mother falsely claimed were his fathers. To understand they are real people, not just names in his mother's confusing stories, and that they wish him no ill will. There's no obligation, of course, but I wanted to ask if you consider it, for Leo's sake. I looked at Jessica, who gave me a small, supportive nod. I thought of Leo's confused, poignant letter. The anger I felt towards Sarah was still there, a cold, hard knot. But for Leo, I took a deep breath. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice calm, imbued with a strength I hadn't possessed years ago. "Let's talk about what's best for Leo." It took another year, a long and complicated search by Mr. Henderson's team, but they eventually found him, Leo's biological father. Turns out, he was a musician from overseas, someone Sarah had a very brief, almost anonymous fling with during a music festival, just before she'd re-enter my life with her grand deception. A man who never even knew she was pregnant, let alone that he had a son. He was shocked, overwhelmed, but then, surprisingly, proved to be a decently responsible man. He began the process of getting to know Leo, carefully supported by therapists and Mr. Henderson. As for me, I learned that sometimes the most elaborate lies build the most inescapable prisons, not for the targets, but for those who tell them. And that little boy, Leo, he deserved the truth every child does. And finally, painstakingly, he was starting to get it piece by piece. My life, after so long, was finally my own again, unburdened, in that I realized is a kind of peace, a kind of freedom that you simply can't put a price on. The nightmare was over.